Welcome. Please comment where you're watching from in the world. I should have known better, to be honest. That's the part that still burns me when I think about it. All the bad flags were there from the beginning. I just wanted so badly for it to be true that I ignored every single one of them. That's how I got into this crap mess to begin with. The night it started, I was scrolling my dating app, thumb numb from swiping through the same parade of mediocrity. Guys holding up fish. Guys with bathroom selfies and toothpaste smeared on the mirror. Guys who thought 6 feet, don't worry ladies, winky face, was a personality. And then he appeared. The picture looked like it was ripped out of a glossy magazine. A man I recognized instantly. Not Hollywood A-list, but B-list famous. He'd been in a Netflix drama I binged last year, the kind where he played the charming bad boy. He had one of those dangerous smiles, like he knew things he shouldn't. My finger froze above the screen. There was no way. It had to be fake. But the profile wasn't empty. It had details. Springfield, Illinois. Love live music, bar food, and traveling when I can. Looking for someone who doesn't play games. I laughed. Out loud. I even showed it to my roommate. Look at this, I said. Somebody actually made a catfish account with a celebrity. How pathetic. But later, when I was lying in bed and the insomnia hit, I swiped right anyway. I don't know why. Maybe just to see if it would match. Maybe to entertain myself. It matched. Immediately. My heart skipped. And then came the message. Simple. Direct. Hey Abby. You look different from most of the girls on here. Genuine. I stared at it for 10 minutes, waiting for the scam to reveal itself. But the longer I looked, the more I convinced myself maybe it wasn't fake. He didn't drop a cheesy pickup line. He didn't send me a link. He just talked. And God, he was good at it. The next 2 weeks were a blur of messages and late-night texts. He knew things about my city, places only locals would know. He joked about the brutal Illinois winters. He asked about my favorite shows, and when I mentioned one, he quoted lines back to me. It felt personal, like he was listening. I told myself a dozen times it couldn't be real. But every time I wavered, he said something that reeled me back in. When he suggested we meet in person, I almost said no. But then I pictured it. Walking into a restaurant with him, people staring, me laughing at the idea of Abby Harper from nowhere, Illinois, out on a date with a celebrity. I was hooked. We agreed on a diner outside Springfield. Low-key. Out of the way. I like to keep things quiet, he said. Don't want the wrong kind of attention. It made sense. The night of the date, I spent an hour on my makeup, another on my hair, and changed outfits 4 times. By the time I slid into my car, my stomach was in knots. The diner was ordinary, neon buzzing, smell of grease and coffee, booths patched with duct tape. The kind of place I'd been to 100 times. But that night, it felt like a stage. He was already there when I walked in, sitting at a corner booth. For one terrifying second, I thought it really was him. The haircut, the clothes, the grin. My breath caught. Then I got closer, and reality set in. The smile was wrong, too wide, too desperate. The teeth were yellowed. The skin sagged. The eyes, God, the eyes. They were flat and sharp all at once, like a shark's. But he stood up like he'd just won a prize. Abby. His voice was steady, smooth. Too smooth. My throat tightened. You're not who you said you were. He smirked, sliding back into the booth. Of course not. But I know you. And that's when the night turned. He leaned in, close enough that I could smell his cologne, cheap and overpowering. His breath hit my cheek as he spoke. Abigail Harper. Born August 12th. Parents split when you were 11. Brother in Iowa, works construction. You've got $10,000 in your bank account. And, his grin stretched wider. You've got secrets. My stomach dropped. What are you talking about? Then he listed them. One by one. The arrest in college for public intoxication. A stupid mistake I thought no one remembered. The medical bill I'd fought tooth and nail over last year. And then the affair. The married man I'd slept with 3 years ago. Something I'd buried so deep I almost convinced myself it hadn't happened. I felt sick. My hands trembled under the table. How do you know all that? He shrugged, like it was nothing. Doesn't matter. What matters is what I do with it. Unless you want the whole world to know, you're going to give me $10,000. Tonight. My blood roared in my ears. 10 grand. It wasn't impossible. I'd been saving for a down payment. But the certainty in his voice, the way he said it like he owned me, made me feel naked. Exposed. I stammered. I don't. He cut me off with a laugh. Don't bother lying. I've seen the numbers. I know what you've got. And if you don't pay me tonight, I'll send every filthy detail to your job, your family, your friends. Everyone will know what kind of dirty little slut you really are. The word hit me like a slap. Slut. He said it with relish, like he'd been waiting to use it. His eyes crawled over me, slow, invasive. Bet you liked sneaking around. Bet you still do. That's why you dressed up for me, huh? Tight dress, painted lips, you knew exactly what you were doing. My cheeks burned. The humiliation was worse than the fear. He was enjoying this, watching me squirm, savoring it. Something inside me clicked. If I broke down, he'd win. If I screamed, he'd spin it. The only chance I had was to play along. I forced a smile, even as bile rose in my throat. Fine. I'll transfer it. Right now. He smirked, pulling out his phone. Good girl. Do it. My hands shook as I unlocked mine. The banking app glowed. I pretended to type, but under the table, my thumb flew across the screen, opening my messages instead. I typed to my best friend Rachel. Call the police. I'm in danger. Diner. Now. Then I flipped back to the banking app and tapped nonsense, just enough to make it look real. A fake processing bar spun slowly. I angled the phone toward him. There. Done. He snatched it, eyes scanning. My chest clenched. If he swiped one screen too far, he'd see the message. But after a tense second, he grinned, tossing it back. Smart girl. Knew you'd behave. I nodded, swallowing bile. So we're done. He leaned in again, breath sour against my ear. Almost. But if you so much as whisper about this, I'll make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of whore you are. I'll ruin you. The words dripped with glee. He wanted me broken. He wanted me scared. And for a moment I was... Then the diner doors slammed open. Heavy footsteps. Sharp voices. Police. Hands where we can see them. His face went white. He lurched to his feet, chair scraping, but 2 officers were already there, slamming him against the floor. Diners gasped. Someone clapped. My phone buzzed with Rachel's reply. Hang on. They're there. You're safe. It started like most things do these days. On my phone, late at night, half distracted. I matched with Tanya on Tinder around 11 p.m. on a Tuesday. Her profile was a little vague. A few filtered selfies, a quote about living in the moment, and not much else. But she was attractive and messaged first, which was rare enough to make me curious. You look like you know how to have a good time. Winking face. Slick. Maybe. But harmless. I messaged back, and within an hour we had a rhythm. Short, flirty exchanges, nothing too deep. She asked what I did, graphic design, where I lived midtown, and if I was seeing anyone seriously, I wasn't. By the next day, we were texting. She didn't want to talk on the phone, said she hated her voice. I brushed it off. I've had good dates start this way before. Not everyone's into phone calls. By Thursday, she suggested we meet up. Let's grab a drink, I offered. I have a better idea, she replied. You ever been to Grant Park at night? It was a weird suggestion. Grant Park's not exactly hopping after sundown. A lot of trees, winding paths, and not much lighting. But she made it sound spontaneous, a little rebellious. It's quiet and kind of romantic, she said. Plus, I like being outside. I paused. My instincts gave me a mild nudge then, a whisper that this wasn't typical. But I'd been burned by overthinking before. I told myself to be open. Not every plan has to be dinner and drinks. Sure, I said. What time? 9:30, meet by the fountain. That night, I pulled into a parking lot near the park entrance. It was just past 9:20. The air was thick with humidity, the kind that clings to your skin and makes everything feel slower. I texted Tanya that I was there. No reply. I waited 10 minutes. Still nothing. I leaned against my car, scanning the dark shapes of trees in the distance. A few joggers passed. Some people walking dogs. But no Tanya. Then, at 9:40, my phone buzzed. Sorry. Just parked. Meet me by the big stone bench near the path entrance. I'm wearing a black hoodie. I followed the curved walkway that led into the trees. The deeper I went, the darker it got. The streetlights didn't reach this far, and the only illumination came from a flickering bulb near an old maintenance shed. That was when I started to feel it. The quiet wasn't peaceful, it was hollow, like the park had swallowed all the noise. I reached the bench. It was empty. I turned in a slow circle, scanning the area. That's when I heard footsteps behind me. 3 men stepped out from the trees. One had a hoodie pulled low over his face. Another held something shiny. At first I thought it was a phone, then I saw the glint of a blade. Yo, One of them said, "You Marcus?" I didn't answer. My heart dropped, cold and hard. "Where's Tanya?" I asked, already knowing the answer. The one with the blade laughed. "Oh, she's around." The third guy stepped in closer. "Wallet. Phone. Now." I backed up, hands raised. "Let's not do something stupid here." The guy closest to me lunged. I sidestepped fast and caught him in the ribs with an elbow. He stumbled. The one with the knife came at me next, sloppy, like he didn't expect me to fight back. I pivoted and ran. I could hear them behind me, crashing through the brush, cursing. But I ran track in college. I knew how to move. I cut through the trees, jumped a low fence, and didn't stop until I burst out of the park and onto the sidewalk near Boulevard. A couple walking their dog saw me and startled. I must have looked insane, sweating, eyes wide, shirt ripped. I didn't explain. I just kept moving until I reached my car. Locked the doors. Hands shaking. When I finally looked at my phone, I saw a new message from Tanya. "Hey, sorry I got called away. Everything okay?" I stared at it for a long time. There was no mistaking it now. Tanya wasn't real. Or if she wasn't the one texting. Maybe it was one of the guys. Maybe it was all bait from the beginning. I didn't reply. I reported the profile. Blocked the number. Then I drove home fast, every shadow on the road making me tense. I didn't call the police right away. What was I going to say? That I met a woman on an app, and 3 guys tried to rob me in a public park? I didn't have names. I didn't have photos. I didn't even get a good look at their faces. But I filed a report the next day, just in case someone else got the same message I did. Later that week, I checked Tinder again. The Tanya profile was gone. Sometimes I wonder how many others didn't get away. I still use dating apps, but I meet in public now. Bright, busy places. No exceptions. And I listen when my gut speaks up, because it only takes one wrong turn to lose everything. This happened about 2 years ago when I was still living in Denver. I was 29, single, and working as a freelance copywriter, which meant I had a lot of flexibility and a weird sleep schedule. I'd stay up late writing or gaming, and often didn't even think about dinner until 9 p.m. I wasn't lonely exactly, but I was definitely open to meeting someone. So like most people my age, I downloaded some dating apps, Hinge, Bumble, and Tinder in rotation. Bumble became my preference because it felt a little more intentional. Women messaged first, which I appreciated. It filtered out some of the randomness, or so I thought. That's how I matched with Marissa. Her profile was attractive but minimal. She had 3 photos, one of her sitting on the hood of a Jeep with a mountain backdrop, one where she was holding a coffee cup and smiling at the camera, and a third that looked like a dimly lit selfie from a bathroom mirror. Her bio read, "Looking for something real, but also spontaneous. Let's skip the small talk." I'm not usually into vague bios, but her smile was disarming and her eyes had a kind of confident mischief. Plus, she messaged me first. Her first message was, "You seem interesting. Want to do something a little crazy tonight?" It was 10:42 p.m. on a Thursday. I was in sweatpants, eating popcorn, watching reruns of The Office. I stared at the message for a few seconds, considered ignoring it, then replied, "What kind of crazy are we talking about?" She answered almost immediately, "Meet me at Cheeseman Park. North entrance. Midnight. Bring a blanket." No greeting. No follow-up question. Just that. I hesitated. Cheeseman Park was a huge, open space near downtown, and while it was beautiful during the day, it got weird at night. I jogged there before and noticed the way the vibe shifted after sunset. Fewer people, more shadows, and the kind of silence that makes you look over your shoulder. Still, I was intrigued. There was something magnetic about the way Marissa messaged. No emojis, no fluff. Just a direct challenge. I asked, "Why Cheeseman? It's kind of late for a park meetup." She replied, "Because you don't get a sunrise without a little darkness first." That made me pause. It sounded poetic, maybe even flirtatious, but also odd. I stared at that line for a while. I even Googled it, wondering if it was a lyric or quote. Nothing came up. Maybe she made it up. Maybe she just wanted to sound deep. Most people would have called it off right there. But the part of me that spends late nights writing fiction and living in worlds of imagined danger told me this could be something memorable. A story, at least. Midnight came, and I found myself driving toward Cheeseman Park. I brought a blanket, like she said. Also, my phone was fully charged, and I shared my location with my friend Connor, just in case. I told him I was meeting someone from Bumble, and gave him the park's address. He responded with a thumbs up and a skull emoji. As I pulled up to the north entrance, I was struck by how empty it felt. No cars, no joggers, no couples walking dogs, just rows of trees, dim path lights, and a thick quiet that settled over everything. I parked near the curb, killed the engine, and scanned the area. No sign of her. I waited inside my car for about 5 minutes, watching the entrance. My fingers tapped against the steering wheel. I felt a little ridiculous, blanket on the passenger seat, my heart beating faster than I wanted to admit. At 12:08, I texted her. "I'm here. Where are you?" No response. I waited another 10 minutes, then got out of the car. The air was cool and dry, and the silence felt deeper than it should have. I walked toward the main path, blanket folded under my arm, phone in hand with the flashlight ready to go. Still nothing. I texted again. "Hey, just checking in. Are you on your way?" "Read receipt, no." I looked around. The park stretched out in all directions, trees, grass fields, old stone fountains. The kind of place that would make a perfect setting for a late-night picnic or a horror film. That's when I noticed something strange. There was a car idling across the street, maybe 30 yards from mine. No headlights on. Just sitting there. I hadn't noticed it when I arrived. Maybe I missed it. Maybe it pulled up later. I couldn't see inside because of the tinted windows. The hairs on my neck stood up. I turned back and walked slowly to my car. As I reached for the handle, I glanced back at the idling car. Its headlights flicked on. I didn't wait. I got in, locked the doors immediately, and started the engine. I pulled out and drove away, keeping an eye on the rearview mirror. The other car didn't follow. When I got home, I checked Bumble. Marissa's profile was gone. Not unmatched, completely vanished. No trace in my matches, no username, nothing. Like she'd never existed. I texted Connor. "Back home." Nothing happened. Just weird vibes. He replied, "You alive? Don't do dumb midnight Bumble rendezvous again, bro." I laughed, but it was the nervous kind. That kind of tight, breathy laugh that doesn't come from amusement, but from relief. Over the next few days, I kept thinking back to that night. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe she got cold feet. Maybe she was messing with me. Maybe the other car was unrelated. But the more I thought about it, the less sense it made. Why suggest a meeting in a dark, empty park at midnight? Why vanish afterward? I started searching Reddit, forums, anything that might explain what happened. I came across a few posts from people who'd had similar experiences, being lured to odd places by dating app matches who disappeared. Some suspected it was a prank. Others thought it was a setup, robberies, assaults, even trafficking attempts. The idea that it might have been a trap hit me like a punch in the chest. I hadn't brought anything valuable with me. No jewelry, no cash. But if I'd walked deeper into the park, if I hadn't trusted that flicker of instinct when I saw that car, who knows? There's a kind of shame that comes with almost being a victim. You don't want to tell people because you feel stupid. You replay all the red flags you ignored. You wonder what parts of your curiosity or ego or loneliness made you go. But I'm telling this story because I think it's important to remind people, especially guys, that we're not immune to danger. That gut feeling you get, it's there for a reason. I still use dating apps. I still meet people. But I meet them in coffee shops now. In daylight. Where there are other people around. I don't care how spontaneous or poetic someone sounds. If they want to meet in a dark park at midnight, I'm out. I've kept the blanket in my car, though. It's a strange sort of reminder. Of what didn't happen. Of the story that almost was. I was 23 when this happened, just a few months out of college, and living in a cozy apartment in the Pearl District of Portland. It was one of those old buildings with creaky wooden floors and tall windows that let in a surprising amount of light, even on Portland's famously gray days. I had recently started using Hinge after a friend told me it was less sketchy than the other dating apps. At the time, I was open to meeting someone, but I wasn't desperate. I'd had a few relationships before, and I was in no rush to jump into another one. I remember lying on my couch one night, half watching a Netflix documentary, and half scrolling through Hinge when I matched with a guy named Ethan. He had shaggy brown hair, thick-rimmed glasses, and a full beard. He kind of looked like the kind of guy who played bass in a folk band or worked at a record store. I won't lie, he wasn't exactly my usual type, but there was something about his style that caught my eye. Quirky, maybe. Artsy. His first message was a reply to one of my prompts. If I could have dinner with anyone, dead or alive, it'd be David Bowie. I had written that I'd want to have dinner with Anthony Bourdain. Ethan responded, Only if we can get Bowie to cook. I laughed. It was cheesy, but it was better than hey. We chatted off and on for about a week. Ethan wasn't overly flirty, but he was interesting. He told me he worked at a small design firm in town and did photography on the side. We had a good back and forth, and after a few days, he asked if I wanted to meet up in person. I said yes. There's a bar in the northwest part of the city called the Rusted Owl. Kind of a dive, but not in a gross way. I'd been there a few times with friends, and it had a relaxed vibe. I suggested it for our first date. Ethan agreed, and we made plans to meet on a Thursday evening. I was running late that night, which is typical for me. I texted him to let him know, and when I arrived 10 minutes after our meet-up time, he was already standing outside near the entrance. He smiled when he saw me and gave a small wave. In person, Ethan looked just like his pictures, maybe a little taller than I expected, and he had this slightly awkward energy, like he wasn't quite sure what to do with his hands. We went inside, grabbed a booth near the back, and ordered drinks. Conversation flowed easily enough. He was soft-spoken, but he listened well and asked thoughtful questions. I could tell he was nervous, but not in a creepy way, more like it had been a while since his last date. We talked about music, our favorite podcasts, and the weirdest things we'd ever eaten. It wasn't fireworks or anything, but it was pleasant. I left that night thinking, maybe. Ethan texted me the next day to say he had a nice time. I replied politely, saying the same. Over the next couple of weeks, we exchanged a few sporadic texts. He'd message me every couple of days, but then go silent for 4 or 5 days at a time. I didn't think much of it. Some people are just bad at texting. But eventually, I stopped responding. I figured it fizzled out. Then one Friday night, I got a message from Ethan out of the blue. It was short. Hey, want to hang out tonight? I was home alone, curled up with a glass of wine and a book, and I figured, why not? I wasn't doing anything important, and I didn't have plans for the weekend. I replied, sure, come pick me up. Looking back, that was a mistake. About half an hour later, Ethan pulled up outside my building in a beat-up sky blue Honda Civic. I recognized the car from our first date because of a huge dent in the rear bumper. I got in, and from the moment I shut the door, the vibe was off. He barely said anything. No smile, no joke, no how was your week? Instead, he stared straight ahead and mumbled something about going to a new bar he'd found. I tried to fill the silence with small talk, but he would only nod or give one-word answers. My gut told me something was wrong. When we arrived at the bar, a place I'd never been before, I knew I didn't want to stay. It was dimly lit and empty except for the bartender and a couple in the far corner. As soon as Ethan parked the car, I pulled out my phone and pretended to get a call. I answered the imaginary call with a dramatic gasp and said, "Oh no, seriously? Okay, I'll be right there." I hung up and turned to Ethan. "Hey, I'm so sorry, but my roommate just had a pipe burst in our kitchen. I need to head back and help her out." He didn't say anything, just stared at me with this blank expression. Then finally he nodded. I got out of the car, walked away quickly, and didn't look back. As soon as I was on the bus, I blocked his number and unmatched him on Hinge. It wasn't like he'd done anything explicitly bad. He didn't yell, he didn't touch me. But something about the night left me deeply unsettled. That should have been the end of it. But it wasn't. A few days later, I got a friend request on Facebook from an account with no profile picture and a name I didn't recognize. I declined it. Then, I got a follow notification on Instagram from an account that had no posts and followed only one person, me. Creeped out, I blocked it. Then I started seeing his car. At first, I thought I was imagining it. That same dented Civic parked near the coffee shop I frequent. Then again, outside the yoga studio I go to twice a week. And once, right across the street from my apartment building. Always parked. Never anyone inside. I told myself it was just my imagination. Coincidence. There are tons of Civics in Portland. Then one night, I stayed late at work. It was winter, and the sun had already gone down. I was walking the few blocks home when I saw the car again, parked under a streetlight. This time, I saw him sitting in the driver's seat. I crossed to the other side of the street and walked faster. My heart was thudding in my chest. I didn't want to believe what was happening. About half a block from my apartment, I felt a hand grab my arm from behind. It was Ethan. He didn't say anything at first, just gripped my arm tightly. I pulled and tried to jerk away, but he held on. Then he said, "Why are you avoiding me?" I panicked. I screamed, loud and long and desperate. The street was quiet, but my scream must have carried. A few porch lights flicked on. Someone shouted from a second-story window. A woman came out of a building down the block holding her phone. Ethan let go and ran. I called the police that night. My voice was shaking. My hands were ice cold. I gave them everything I could: his name, the details from Hinge, a description of his car, the license plate number I had memorized. The officer I spoke to took me seriously. He told me I had done the right thing. That same night, I filed for a restraining order. The legal process wasn't quick, but it moved. I had to go to court a few weeks later to testify. Ethan didn't show up, which apparently worked in my favor. The restraining order was granted. I haven't seen him since. But for weeks, I jumped every time I saw a Civic. I stopped walking home alone, changed my social media settings to private, and got a security camera for my apartment door. I even bought pepper spray and started carrying it in my coat pocket. What sticks with me most isn't just the fear, it's the guilt. I keep replaying all the little moments where I brushed off my instincts. The weird silence in the car, the empty stare, the way he kept popping up in my life after I cut him off. I wanted to believe I was overreacting, that I was being dramatic, but I wasn't. I was right. This happened last year when I was still single. I'm 27 now, but at the time, I had just turned 26. I was living in a small apartment in Capitol Hill, one of the more lively neighborhoods in Seattle. It was a quirky little place, second-floor unit, creaky hardwood floors, and a big bay window that overlooked the street and the neighborhood dog park. I had just gone through a breakup a few months earlier and wasn't ready to date again seriously, but I was feeling curious, maybe even a little bored. That's when I downloaded Tinder. To be honest, I wasn't looking for anything meaningful. I was more intrigued by the idea of swiping through people's profiles, reading their bios, or at least pretending to. In reality, I was like a lot of people on Tinder. I mostly looked at the pictures. I'd open the app once a day, maybe twice if I was especially bored. I didn't swipe right even once during that first week. I wasn't even sure I wanted to meet anyone. I was just observing, like peeking through a digital window into other people's lives. But there was one profile that I saw over and over. His name was Owen. The first time I saw him, I barely registered anything. He looked like a clean-cut guy, maybe early 30s. A little stocky but tall, probably around 6 feet if I had to guess. His photos were basic. One of him in front of a lake, one with a golden retriever, and another in a button-down shirt at what looked like a wedding. What stood out wasn't the profile, it was the frequency. Every single time I opened the app, Owen would be there. Always one of the first 5 profiles. At first, I thought it was a coincidence. Maybe we had similar interests, or we were in the same age range. But it kept happening. Day after day, there he was. Eventually, I figured it must be some kind of paid feature. I had heard Tinder lets you boost your profile for visibility, so I assumed that's what Owen was doing. It didn't matter to me, though. I always swiped left. Not because he looked particularly bad or anything. I just wasn't interested. Then one Saturday afternoon, something odd happened. I was walking my dog, a little terrier-poodle mix named Scout, at the park near my apartment. It was one of those gloomy Seattle days where the sky looked like wet cement, and the air smelled faintly of rain and pine. As I walked along the gravel path, I noticed a man approaching in the opposite direction. He nodded politely as we passed, and I nodded back. I didn't think much of it at first, but as I kept walking, something tugged at the back of my mind. There was something familiar about his face. I turned my head slightly and looked back. He had already turned a corner and disappeared behind a group of trees. It took me a few minutes to place him, but when I got home and opened Tinder again, there he was. Owen. I stared at the profile photo, comparing it to the man from the park. It was definitely him. The same square jaw, the same blue hoodie. I felt a strange chill creep over me. I know Seattle's a big city, but it's not impossible to run into people. Still, the timing felt weird. It wasn't late, it wasn't dark, but it felt off. I tried not to overthink it. Coincidences happen, I told myself. But that wasn't the only time it happened. Over the next few weeks, I kept seeing Owen, not just on the app, but in real life too. Once at the grocery store near my apartment. Another time outside a coffee shop I liked to visit. He never approached me, never said a word. Just a quick glance, a nod, and he'd move on. Each time, I felt a little more unsettled. I started to wonder if it really was a coincidence. Then came the night I knew it wasn't. It was a Thursday around 10:30 p.m. I had just finished brushing my teeth and was getting ready for bed. Scout was curled up in his little bed beside mine. I was standing by the window, pulling the curtains closed, when something caught my eye. Two eyes, staring back at me. There was a face in the window. For a split second, I froze. My mind couldn't process what I was seeing. My apartment was on the second floor. There was no balcony, no fire escape, nothing. The only way someone could be at my window was if they climbed. As soon as our eyes locked, the face disappeared. I rushed to the window and yanked it open. I looked down and saw a man sprinting away into the darkness. He was wearing a hoodie, and I couldn't see his face, but there was something about his build, his posture. I felt it in my gut. It was Owen. I slammed the window shut, my hands trembling. Scout started barking, sensing my fear. I grabbed my phone and called 911. The dispatcher was calm and professional. She told me to stay inside, lock the doors, and wait for officers to arrive. When they came, they were surprisingly kind. They checked the area, took my statement, and advised me to stay somewhere else for the night. I packed a bag and went to stay at my friend Liz's place across town. The next day, Liz came with me to the police station to file an official report. I didn't have Owen's last name, address, or phone number. The only connection I had to him was Tinder. I explained to the officer that I'd never met him, never matched with him, never even messaged him. That's when the detective working my case came up with an idea. He asked if I still had the Tinder app. I said yes and opened it. We sat in the station cafeteria, scrolling together as I swiped left on dozens of profiles, waiting for Owens to appear again. It took about 20 minutes, but eventually there he was. "That's him," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. The detective took a photo of the screen and logged the username. Apparently, Tinder profiles are linked to phone numbers and emails, and with some help from the app's legal team, law enforcement can request information in cases like this. I signed the paperwork for a restraining order that afternoon. The next few days were a blur. I stayed with Liz for a week while the police followed up. I didn't hear much, but I was told that they had located Owen and that he had been served with the restraining order. I never saw him again after that. I moved out of my apartment 2 months later. It was too hard to sleep there. Every creak of the floorboards, every flicker of light outside the window made my heart race. I found a new place in a more secure building with limited access and video surveillance. Scout adjusted quickly, and so did I, eventually. I haven't used Tinder since. It's not that I blame the app. Most people use it without ever experiencing something like this. But for me, that window, the literal one in my old apartment and the metaphorical one I opened when I downloaded Tinder, became a gateway to something dark. There's one last thing I haven't told many people. About a month after I moved, I got a letter in the mail. No return address. The handwriting was shaky and uneven. It wasn't long, just a single index card. It said, "You looked right at me." That's all. Nothing else. I took it to the police, but they said there wasn't much they could do without proof it was from Owen. They told me to stay vigilant and keep my doors locked. So I do. And every night, before I go to bed, I check the window. Just in case. I matched with Jenna on a Friday evening while I was half watching some true crime doc and half doom scrolling. The kind of night where the bed's warm, the room's dark, and the phone glow feels like permission to be reckless. Her profile felt effortless. Cropped hair, a mouth that looked like trouble, captions that sounded like she'd laugh in your ear and then steal your fries. I'm not 22 anymore. I don't fall for bios. But she had the exact kind of chaotic charm that makes you say screw it and swipe. She messaged first. Quick, clever, a little sharp. We volleyed for 3 days, the kind of messages that inch closer to the line, banter about taco preferences, the right amount of heat, a joke about messy hands, messy minds, and then a sideways comment about my arms in one of my photos. Adults flirting without pretending they're not. NSFW by implication, not declaration. My body remembered how good it was to be wanted. My brain was half a step behind, already plotting which shirt made me look like I cared, but not that much. She picked the place. A new taco spot with 2 bright murals and cocktails that come in glasses that look like science experiments. Her insistence was playful, but it was insistence. I didn't mind. I liked the decisiveness. I liked that it hinted at someone who knew what she wanted: food, drinks, maybe me. I got there early. That's something I do now. Show up before I can be caught off guard. The room smelled like lime and char, mezcal and cilantro. I ordered a drink that tasted like smoke and oranges. When she walked in, the whole place shifted. She was put together like a blueprint, earrings catching the light, perfume that found my throat and stayed there. She smiled in a way that told me she'd been smiled at her whole life, and I did the dumb thing men do when beauty meets confidence. I relaxed. I let my guard down. My body sat forward. I forgot, for a second, that people can be a game. Jenna was better in person, faster, warmer, funnier. She had a habit of touching my wrist when she made a point. It wasn't sexual, it was pointed. A stay-with-me kind of touch. And I did. The first round vanished, the tacos landed, the heat cut my tongue, and I watched her talk with her hands, her mouth glossed and careful. I thought stupid thoughts about how good she looked laughing. I thought about her necklace, the small pulse at her throat. I thought, if the kiss is half as good as this, I'm done. Then the shift, so small I almost missed it. She reached for her phone mid-story. No apology, no flinch. Just a check. When she put it down, the screen faced up. My eyes skimmed without meaning to, cells and columns, a tidy grid, and across the top, bolded like a headline, Tinder meals. It didn't land all at once. I told myself it was a joke, a group chat dare, a meme in spreadsheet clothing. She kept talking. I kept nodding. But my gaze tripped again, and the rows clarified, names, dates, restaurants, and to the right amounts. Sums. Totals. A system. My name sat already typed in, the amount column blank like a mouth waiting to be fed. I felt heat crawl up my neck. Not jealousy, not exactly shame, something older. The sensation of being handled. Managed. I lifted my drink and swallowed something bitter. I didn't call her on it. Curiosity can be a kink all its own. I wanted to see how far she'd go. Far it turned out. She ordered dessert like it was a foregone conclusion, waved the menu away without looking. When the check came, she didn't do the pantomime. No reach, no wallet theater. Just a small glide of leather toward me with an expression that said, "This is how it works." Somewhere between humiliation and arousal, I paid. If you want the truth, part of me was turned on by the audacity, by the unapologetic, almost predatory competence of it. Another part of me, the one that keeps a tally of all the times I've been made into a resource, went quiet and mean. Outside, the air was hot and damp, the street humming. She leaned in, the space between us smelling like citrus and skin, and told me, like gossip she couldn't wait to share, about the spreadsheet. Not defensively. Not coy. Proud. She'd been optimizing, she said. 3 dinners a week, never the same place too often, rotating neighborhoods. She laughed about bar managers who comped drinks. She told me her running total, just shy of $3,000, like a high score. She had a sushi place in mind for next week, already slotted. I was a calendar item. A line item. I nodded. I asked questions. I was collecting data like a coward. She let me walk her to her car. She hugged me, a quick press, body to body, that lit up my skin because my skin is still an idiot. She said she'd text about the sushi. Then she drove off, taillights blinking like a punchline. Driving home, I hated myself in that familiar, adult way, for paying, for wanting, for being fascinated by someone who made me an object because she did it with such clean hands. I stared too long at red lights and thought about how organization can be a weapon. I imagined that spreadsheet again and again, my name waiting, the amount column filling itself in as if by spell. She texted the next morning, bright and casual, a link to the place with the omakase that would blow my mind, winking emoji like a stamp. I didn't reply. My thumb hovered over the keyboard, over the old impulses. Call her out, moralize, turn it into a lesson she wouldn't read. Instead, I put the phone face down and sat with a smaller truth. I wasn't hurt because she scammed me. I was hurt because, for a few hours, I believed the performance. I let the attention and the leaning in and the wrist touches tell me a story I wanted to hear. And underneath that was something uglier. I liked being chosen, even if the choosing was transactional. That's the part that keeps me up at 2 a.m. with the room quiet and the fan ticking. It messed with my body in ways I don't say out loud. I'll be halfway through a first drink on a new date and suddenly picture her sliding the bill toward me with that expressionless expectation. My chest tightens. My palms sweat. If the person across from me is specific about the restaurant, my stomach flips, dull and animal. I think about the way Jenna's perfume stuck to my shirt, how I smelled it hours later and felt both hollow and wired. It's not graphic, what lingers, it's the after sensations. The warmth of a thigh pressed against mine in a booth, the indirect promise in a glance, the ghost heat of someone who wasn't there for me at all. It's adult and stupid and embarrassing to admit. My body still responds to the memory, like a dog that hears a whistle I can't. If I'm honest, because that's the point of telling this, the trauma isn't theatrical. There's no screaming. It's small cuts, the second guessing, the pause before agreeing to dinner, the way I double-check my own motives. I can feel myself tightening, getting economical with tenderness. I hate that. I hate how one woman's spreadsheet became my weather. I hate that I replay the night like a clip. Her mouth glossy, the cell borders crisp, the me of it all sitting there with carne asada cooling in his hands. I'd been on Tinder long enough to know the cycle. Some flirtation, a few decent conversations, try it on back to my place, maybe a date that ended in awkward silence or a half hug in a parking lot. But Ryan stood out from the others, and it was about time. He messaged me first. "You've got the kind of smile that makes people want to tell the truth." Dangerous. It was a line, sure, but it made me laugh. His profile wasn't bad either. He was 29, worked in marketing, had a dog named Pixel, and said he played guitar badly but with enthusiasm. He had a picture playing beach volleyball, another at a brewery, and one holding a coffee cup in front of a mural in Midtown. We messaged for a few days. He was funny, responsive, and asked thoughtful questions. He didn't rush to get my number or push for a late-night meetup. It felt like someone genuinely trying to make a connection. When he asked if I wanted to grab dinner at a tapas place downtown, I said yes. I arrived a few minutes early. He was already there, standing outside, checking his phone. When he looked up and smiled, I felt that fluttery nervousness that sometimes comes before a first kiss, but we hadn't even sat down yet. He opened the door for me, complimented my dress. At the table, he asked if I liked red wine or white. I said I didn't know, depends on the meal. He ordered a bottle of red anyway. The conversation flowed easily. He told me about his job at a digital ad agency, his dog, how he hated olives but loved olive oil. I told him about my job in HR, my cat, my ongoing quest to find a good pair of jeans. Somewhere between the second and third small plate, he leaned back and said, "You're even better in person." Before I could respond, someone shouted, "Oh my God, are you serious?" I turned. A woman stood near the entrance, glaring at us. Her hair was in a messy bun, and she wore leggings and a frayed hoodie. She looked furious. "Wow, Ryan," she said. "You didn't waste any time." Ryan's face turned pale. "Taylor, what are you doing here?" "You blocked me," she said. "Then what? Come here on a date like I'm not even real." People were staring. A waiter hovered awkwardly nearby, unsure whether to intervene. "I think you should leave," Ryan said, his voice low and sharp. She looked at me. "You have no idea who he is." "None." Then she turned and stormed out. I sat there, stunned. Ryan sighed and ran a hand over his face. "I am so sorry. That's my ex. She's been difficult. She's not over it." I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to leave. Another part didn't want to make a scene. He apologized again. Said he understood if I wanted to go. But he looked so embarrassed, almost wounded, that I stayed. We finished the meal, though the mood had shifted. He walked me to my car, gave me a hug, and said he hoped I'd give him another chance to show he wasn't the guy she made me out to be. I said I'd think about it. The next morning, there were 3 texts from him. "Last night was crazy. Again, I'm really sorry. I had a great time though. Hope you did too. Let me know if you're free this weekend. I'd love to see you again." I didn't answer right away. I needed time to think. By the 3rd day, he sent another message. "I hope you're not ghosting me. That would really suck." That rubbed me the wrong way. So I replied, "Hey, I just need some space." That was a lot, and I'm not sure I'm comfortable continuing things. He responded within a minute. "Wow, so you're going to let one crazy ex ruin this?" Then, 10 minutes later, "I thought you were different." I didn't reply. That's when things got strange. A week later, I came home from work and found a coffee cup on my doorstep. One of those reusable ones from Starbucks. On the lid was a sticky note that said, "Your favorite." It wasn't signed, but I knew it was him. I hadn't told him where I lived. I texted him immediately. "How do you know where I live?" No response. The next day, I saw him outside my office building. He didn't try to talk to me. Just stood across the street, sipping coffee and watching. I told myself I was overreacting. That maybe it was a coincidence. That maybe he was just passing by. But the next night, I got an Instagram DM from an account with no name, no profile photo. It just said, "You chose me. You don't get to change your mind." That night, I slept with all the lights on. I blocked the account. I double-checked my privacy settings. I told my roommate everything. She immediately made me file a police report. The officer listened carefully, took notes, and said, "We get more of these than you'd think." Keep documenting everything. If he shows up again, call us. I filed for a restraining order, but the process was slow. Meanwhile, Ryan didn't stop. He kept creating new accounts. Sent messages like, "You're hurting me. I don't understand why. You're making a mistake. I'm not going anywhere." One night, my roommate and I came home to find a bouquet of roses taped to our apartment door. No note. Just the flowers, petals already wilting. She wanted to call the police again. I did too, but I hesitated. I couldn't prove it was him. A week later, it escalated. I was walking to my car after work when I saw movement near the rear bumper. Ryan stood there, half shadowed by the parking garage pillar. "Hey," he said, like we were just running into each other. I backed away. "You need to leave." He stepped forward. "I just want to talk. That's all." I said, "Leave." "I'm not trying to hurt you," he said, his voice rising. "But you can't just shut me out." I turned and ran. Got into the building and locked the door behind me. Security called the police. By the time they arrived, he was gone. That was enough. I moved out a week later. Stayed with my sister in another city while I looked for a new place. Got a new phone number. Deleted every account I could think of. Even changed my name on LinkedIn. For months, I jumped at every sound. If someone walked too close behind me, I turned. I started carrying pepper spray and a personal alarm. I memorized license plates. I stopped going anywhere alone after sunset. Eventually, the messages stopped. Or maybe I just stopped seeing them. I don't know which. I never heard from Ryan again. But I still think about his ex, the one who shouted in the restaurant. I wonder how long she dealt with it. How long she tried to warn other people. How many of us there were. People say first impressions matter. But sometimes the real person doesn't show up until they've been told no. And sometimes, no is the thing they can't let go of. I met him at a dimly lit pub, the kind of place where the music is just loud enough to drown out your better judgment. He was charming in a rugged, rough-around-the-edges way, the kind of guy who made you feel like the most fascinating person in the room. His stories were wild, his laugh infectious. When he invited me back to his place, I hesitated, but only for a moment. I told myself it was part of the adventure, but nothing could have prepared me for what awaited behind his front door. His apartment was the polar opposite of his charisma. As soon as I stepped inside, I felt the air shift. It wasn't just messy, it was chaos frozen in time. Clothes were strewn everywhere, dishes piled high in the sink, and a faint, stale odor hung in the air. But I convinced myself to look past it. People can be messy, right? Besides, it wasn't like I'd come here expecting a 5-star experience. "Make yourself comfortable," he said, motioning toward a couch that had definitely seen better days. "I've got something I want to show you." Before I could respond, he disappeared into another room. I sat down gingerly, trying not to think about what might be lurking between the cushions. The minutes dragged on, the sound of drawers opening and closing breaking the silence. When he finally returned, he was holding something in his hands. A stack of papers, worn and yellowed at the edges, tied together with a frayed piece of string. "I want to share this with you," he said, his voice softer now, almost reverent. "It's my poetry. Now, I like poetry as much as the next person." But when he added, "I wrote it while I was in Mountjoy," my stomach did a little flip. "Mountjoy? As in the prison?" "Mountjoy?" I echoed, trying to keep my tone neutral. "Yeah," he said, a faint smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "I did some time there. Long story. But these poems, they got me through it." He sat down across from me, untying the string with care, as if unwrapping a sacred relic. He handed me the first page, his eyes watching mine intently as I read. The words were raw, heavy with anger and regret. They were scrawled in jagged, uneven handwriting, like they'd been ripped straight from his soul. "It's intense," I said, handing the page back. "Prison changes you," he replied, his gaze distant now. "Makes you see the world differently. You want to hear one?" Before I could answer, he started reciting, his voice low and gravelly, each word punctuated with emotion. It was haunting, beautiful in its way, but also deeply unsettling. By the time he finished, I was struggling to figure out how to respond. But before I could come up with something diplomatic, he clapped his hands together and grinned. "You need a drink," he said, jumping up and heading for the kitchen. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding, glancing around the room. That's when I noticed the faint but unmistakable stench growing stronger. My eyes wandered toward the small hallway, leading to what I assumed was the bathroom. Curiosity got the better of me. I stood, taking a tentative step toward the hallway. The closer I got, the more potent the smell became. It wasn't just bad, it was foul, the kind of smell that sticks to your clothes and lingers in your nostrils. When I finally peeked into the bathroom, my stomach turned. The toilet had no door. None. Just an open, doorless frame leading into a space that could generously be described as a health hazard. And on the wall, God help me, there was something smeared there. Brown, unmistakable. My mind rebelled against the obvious conclusion, but there was no denying it. Shit! On the wall. I froze, a mix of horror and disbelief washing over me. This wasn't just a messy apartment. This was a nightmare. What do you think? His voice called from the other room, startling me. The poetry, I mean. I turned back toward the living room, trying to keep my voice steady. It's unique, I managed to say, my throat dry. Really powerful. He appeared in the hallway, holding 2 mismatched glasses filled with some unidentifiable liquid. He noticed where I was standing, his expression shifting slightly. Oh yeah, he said, rubbing the back of his neck. Meant to get that fixed. Fixed? Fixed? That wasn't something you fix. That was something you burned, cleansed, and exorcised. I realized then and there that I needed to leave. Immediately. I just remembered. I've got an early morning tomorrow, I blurted out, edging toward the door. I should probably get going. He looked disappointed, but didn't argue. All right, he said, handing me one of the glasses anyway. At least have a sip before you go. I didn't. Instead, I set the glass down on the nearest surface, muttered a quick thanks for the poetry, and bolted out the door before he could say anything else. The moment I stepped outside, the fresh air hit me like a blessing. As I walked home, the absurdity of the night started to sink in. The prison poetry, the toilet without a door, the wall. It was almost too much to process. By the time I reached my apartment, I was laughing, partly out of relief, partly out of disbelief. It had been a quiet year. Too many solo dinners, too many Friday nights with takeout and reruns. So when I got a message on POF from Brandy, I was surprised. Her profile said she was 28, a hairstylist, and into hiking, horror movies, and adventures with the right people. Her photos were casual but confident, selfies with perfect winged eyeliner, one of her on a trail, another in a kitchen holding a glass of wine. Her first message was, "Hey there, you seem chill. My boyfriend and I are looking for someone open-minded to meet up with. Curious?" I paused. I'd never been approached by a couple before. It wasn't what I expected, but I was bored enough to keep reading. Her tone was playful, not pushy. She said her boyfriend, Nick, was cool, respectful, and just as into good conversation as I am. She made it sound like a casual hangout. I asked if they were looking for something sexual. She replied, "Not necessarily. We just like meeting good people. No pressure." After a few days of messaging, I agreed to meet them. We planned for a Friday night. Brandy suggested a local bar near Easttown, low-key, decent beer, live music. I figured a public place was safe. We met at 8. Brandy wore a leather jacket over a red dress, and Nick had that scruffy, brooding look, dark jeans, faded band tee, and a cigarette tucked behind one ear. They seemed friendly enough. Brandy did most of the talking, asking about my job, my music taste, if I liked road trips. Nick was quieter. He watched more than he spoke, but when he did talk, his voice was smooth and deliberate. I had one beer, then another. Halfway through the second, my vision blurred a little. I assumed it was the lights, or maybe that I hadn't eaten much. I remember laughing at something Brandy said, then standing up to go to the restroom. That's the last clear memory I have. When I woke up, everything was wrong. I was in the back seat of a car, hands zip-tied behind my back. My head was pounding, my mouth dry. It was dark, too dark to see where we were. The engine hummed softly. I could hear Brandy's voice somewhere in the front seat, saying, "He's still out." Then Nick replied, "We'll ditch him outside the county line." Panic hit me like a flood. I didn't move at first. I kept my eyes mostly closed, breathing slowly, trying to piece together what was happening without alerting them. My wrists were burning from the plastic ties. My phone and wallet were gone. My shoes too. They thought I was unconscious. I listened. They were arguing quietly. Something about the last guy, and whether they should just take the cash and leave him. Brandy said, "We can't keep doing this," and Nick snarled something back that I didn't catch. That's when I realized this wasn't a random thing. They'd done this before. I shifted slightly, enough to feel the door next to me. It wasn't locked. My heart started racing. I knew I had one chance. The car slowed at a turn, gravel under the tires. I waited. As soon as it began to roll forward again, I kicked at the door with everything I had. It flew open. I rolled out hard, scraping my shoulder and hitting my knee on the pavement. I scrambled to my feet and ran into the trees. I didn't look back. I just ran. I heard shouting. Nick yelling, Brandy cursing. A door slammed. Then tires screeched as the car took off. I ran until my legs gave out. Eventually, I found a gas station just off a highway. I must have looked insane, barefoot, bleeding, zip ties still hanging from one wrist. The clerk called 911. The police came fast. I told them everything. The bar, the drinks, the car, their names. They took it seriously. Turned out I wasn't the first. Over the next week, detectives connected Brandy and Nick to at least 2 other assaults. One man was left unconscious by the side of the road. Another had his bank account drained after being drugged and photographed for blackmail. They were arrested within days, caught at a motel outside Kalamazoo with stolen IDs and cash. The story made local news. Couple arrested in online dating abductions. My name wasn't mentioned, but people who knew me figured it out. Friends reached out. Some were shocked. Others admitted they'd had similar close calls, but never reported them. I still don't know what would have happened if I hadn't jumped. I think about that night all the time. How quickly things went from flirtation to survival. How easily charm can mask cruelty. How the worst people don't always look like monsters. Sometimes they look like a couple in a bar, buying you a drink and asking about your favorite road trip. Now, when people bring up dating apps, I just say, be careful. Vet everyone. And trust your instincts. Because I didn't. And I almost didn't make it out alive. I didn't think much of it when Kevin had first messaged me. He opened with, Hey Jasmine, I'm not great at this, but I think you seem interesting. Want to grab coffee sometime at Starbucks? It was normal. And after several months of half-hearted swiping and ghosted conversations, normal sounded nice. We made plans for that Saturday. A 3 p.m. coffee at a place I liked in Northeast Portland. Somewhere public, with good lighting and high foot traffic, my usual rules. When he arrived, he looked just like his photos. Tall, a little lanky, dressed in cargo pants and a faded hoodie. He smiled nervously and waved. From the start, something felt off. It wasn't anything he said. It was the way he stared, too long, too intently. Like he was studying my face for details he wanted to remember later. When I made a joke about caffeine being my love language, he didn't laugh, just said, I'll remember that, and scribbled something in a small notebook he'd brought. I asked what he was writing. Just keeping track, he said. I like to remember things about people I care about. We'd known each other for 30 minutes. I tried to keep the conversation light, but he steered it into strange territory. How he hated being misunderstood, how people in his life never gave him a real chance, how he was done with fakes. At one point, he said, You're different. I can tell. I smiled politely, checked the time, and said I had dinner plans. He looked disappointed but nodded. I didn't offer a hug, just a quick wave as I left. I figured that was the end of it. It wasn't. That night, he texted me 9 times between 7 p.m. and midnight. The first few were harmless. Had a great time today. Still thinking about what you said, trust and boundaries. Very wise. Then, I feel like I've known you longer than just a coffee date. I hope you're not one of those people who just disappears. By the time I woke up Sunday morning, there were 6 more messages. No replies from me. I responded with a simple, Hey Kevin, I think we're not a great match. Wishing you the best, though. He didn't answer. Until the next day. I came home from work to find a note tucked into my mailbox. My full name written on the front in small, careful letters. I opened it. I understand rejection. I really do. But I also believe in not giving up on something that feels real. I think you're scared. I get that. But I'm here when you're ready. No signature. Just K. My stomach dropped. I hadn't given him my last name. I hadn't told him my address. I'd never mentioned specifics about where I lived, only that I was in the Alberta area. I checked my locks. I pulled the blinds. I blocked his number. The next day, he was outside. I saw him through the kitchen window, standing across the street, hands in his pockets, staring up at my building. Not moving. Just watching. I called the police. They came, took a report, but said unless he tried to enter or made a direct threat, there wasn't much they could do. He hasn't technically broken any laws, the officer told me. We'll patrol the area more often. That night, I slept with a kitchen knife under my pillow. Over the next few days, I saw him more. Once outside the grocery store, Once parked near the yoga studio I went to on Mondays. Once just walking past my building, slowly, like he was waiting for me to notice. I started changing my routines. Different route to work. Different grocery store. I stopped going out unless it was necessary. Then, one Friday morning, I found a small box on my doorstep. Inside was a Polaroid photo of me, taken from a distance, through the window of the coffee shop where we'd met. I was laughing, holding a drink, unaware. Underneath the photo was a note. "This is my favorite version of you. I want to see her again." I called the police again. This time, they took it more seriously. The officer who arrived recognized Kevin's name from my earlier report. They filed a formal harassment complaint. Told me to document everything. They had a detective follow up. But still no arrest. I considered a restraining order, but the process was long, and I was overwhelmed. I started staying at a friend's place. Kept my location vague. Turned off location services. Deleted social media. That's when he started emailing me. Different burner accounts. Same tone. "You're making this harder than it has to be. I thought you were kind. Why are you acting like I'm dangerous? I'm not going away." I felt like I was going crazy. Like I had conjured him with one bad date and couldn't undo it. Eventually, with the help of a friend's lawyer, I filed for a protective order. It was granted temporarily. Kevin didn't show up to the hearing. But 2 days later, he left a voicemail from a blocked number. "You think a piece of paper means anything? You'll miss me when I'm gone." That was enough. I packed up and moved. New apartment. New job. New phone number. I didn't tell anyone outside my closest circle. I even changed my last name on social media and locked everything down. It's been over a year. Sometimes, I still flinch when I see a man who looks like him on the street. I keep my curtains closed. I triple-check the locks. I've learned how to scan a room without looking like I'm scanning a room. People think stalking looks like obsessive love. It doesn't. It's control. It's entitlement. It's a person who believes your discomfort is less important than their desire. And it can start with something as simple as a coffee date. I was 26, living in Spokane, and in that weird gray zone between figuring it out and giving up. Meet Me wasn't my usual go-to, but I was tired of the same faces on Tinder. I wasn't looking for anything serious. Mostly just wanted to remember what it felt like to flirt with someone in real time. Mike's profile was simple. No shirtless mirror selfies, no cheesy quotes. Just a few photos, him in a flannel at a campsite, holding a fishing pole, and one with a dog I assumed was his. His bio said, "Laid-back guy. Work in HVAC. Just looking to chill with someone real." We started talking late on a Wednesday night. He was easy to talk to, funny in a dry, deadpan way. When I joked about my inability to keep houseplants alive, he sent a picture of a dead cactus and said, "My plant parenting skills are equally tragic." It felt normal. Comfortable. By Friday, we'd made plans to meet up. He invited me to his place to hang out, have a drink, maybe watch something dumb. I hesitated. Normally, I wouldn't go to someone's house on the first meet. But he didn't push. Said he understood if I wanted to grab coffee instead. That made me trust him more. I agreed to come by. He lived about 15 minutes outside the city, near the edge of a wooded neighborhood full of older ranch-style homes. His place was a single-story house with a gravel driveway and a porch light that flickered when I walked up. He opened the door before I could knock. "Danielle?" he asked, eyes flicking to my car and back to me. I nodded. He smiled and stepped aside. "Come on in. Want a White Claw or something stronger?" I chose water. He laughed, said, "Responsible." "I like it." The inside of the house was dimly lit and sparsely decorated. A couch, a small TV, a few framed posters on the wall, half horror movies, half classic rock bands. A dog bed sat empty in the corner. "No dog tonight?" I asked. He shook his head quickly. "She's with my brother. He's watching her this weekend." We sat on the couch. He put on an episode of It's Always Sunny and offered me chips. We talked about work, spoken winters, and the weirdness of online dating. He was funny and relaxed, until he wasn't. About 30 minutes in, something shifted. I asked him how long he'd lived in the house, and his answer came slower than before. "Couple years. Used to be my mom's place. She passed. I stayed here." There was a pause. Then he added, "Now it's just me and my brother. For now." I nodded. "That's cool. You guys get along." He didn't answer right away. "Sometimes. He's complicated." His eyes drifted toward the hallway. That's when I noticed the door. It It was partially closed, about halfway down the hall. The light underneath it was on. And then I heard it. A faint, muffled sound. Like a thump. Then a low groan. Not a TV sound. Not plumbing. Human. I froze. Mike turned up the volume on the show and said, "Ignore that. Old pipes. This house makes weird noises all the time." It wasn't pipes. I've lived in apartments with bad plumbing. I've heard what that sounds like. This was something else. Another thud. Then a voice, faint, hoarse, and unmistakably distressed. I stood up. "I think I'm gonna head out," I said, trying to keep my voice light. He looked surprised. "You sure? You just got here." "Yeah," I said, grabbing my bag. "I forgot I have an early shift tomorrow." He stood too. "You don't have to leave. We're just hanging out." "I know. I backed toward the door. "I should go." He didn't stop me, but he didn't move to open the door either. Then, from the hallway, a voice cried out, "Please, someone help me." It was faint but clear. A man's voice. My heart slammed against my ribs. I reached for the doorknob, yanked it open, and stepped outside without another word. Mike didn't follow. I ran to my car, locked the doors, and peeled out of the driveway. My hands were shaking so badly that I almost missed the turn back to the main road. I didn't call the police. Not that night. I told myself maybe it was a prank. Maybe they were watching a movie in the other room. Maybe I'd overreacted. But deep down I knew I hadn't. 3 days later, the news broke. 2 brothers in Spokane had been arrested for kidnapping and assaulting their stepfather. The man was found tied up in a locked room of their house, beaten, dehydrated, and barely alive. Their names were Michael and Tyler Hargrove. Mike. I stared at the news article on my phone and felt my blood turn cold. The photo was unmistakable. Same face. Same house. According to the report, they'd been holding their stepfather captive for over a week. Neighbors had heard noises but assumed it was a dog. One neighbor said she saw a woman leave the house days earlier, looking nervous. That was me. I called the police and told them everything. They took my statement seriously, said I'd likely help confirm the timeline. One officer told me quietly, "You're lucky. Real lucky." I never heard from Mike again. He and his brother were both charged with kidnapping, unlawful imprisonment, and attempted murder. The stepfather survived but required multiple surgeries. I replay that night all the time. The way he smiled when I walked in. The easy charm. The flickering porch light. The sound of someone begging behind a closed door. I think about what would have happened if I'd stayed 10 minutes longer. Or if I'd opened that hallway door. Or if Mike had decided I wasn't going to leave. I tell people now, trust your instincts. Even if it feels rude. Even if everything seems fine on the surface. Because danger doesn't always look like danger. Sometimes it looks like a guy in a flannel shirt offering you a white claw. Dating, they say, is supposed to be an adventure. At best, it's a journey toward connection, laughter, and shared dreams. At worst, it's a series of awkward encounters that you laugh about later. I've had my fair share of both, but a few dates stand out in my memory, not for their charm or romance, but for the sheer absurdity of it all. Take the first woman, for example. Let's call her Sarah. We'd been chatting for a while before we decided to meet up, and our first few dates went well. She was smart, funny, and seemed refreshingly straightforward. But things started to unravel by date 5. It began with what seemed like a small misunderstanding. We'd planned to meet for dinner, and her office was just 5 minutes away from the restaurant. I figured it made sense for us to meet there, especially since she'd been so insistent on keeping things fair, splitting the bill on every date, never letting me pay more than my share. I admired her independence, so I didn't think twice about it. But when I arrived at the restaurant, I could tell something was off. She was already seated, arms crossed, her smile notably absent. "You didn't offer to pick me up," she said, her tone sharp. I blinked, caught off guard. I thought since it's so close. She cut me off with a dismissive wave. It's the principle, not the distance. The evening went downhill from there. By the end of the meal, her irritation had simmered into a cold, distant politeness. A few days later, she ended things, her reasoning as baffling as the rest of it. "I need someone who's willing to fight for me," she said, her voice dripping with finality. "You never even tried to insist on paying the bill." I stood there, dumbfounded. Was this a test? Some kind of secret code I was supposed to crack? I never found out. Then there was the woman who, halfway through a pleasant lunch date, dragged me into a high-end boutique. Let's call her Emily. We'd just finished our meal, and I thought things were going well, until she suddenly stopped in front of a Furla store, her eyes lighting up like a kid in a candy shop. Without a word, she walked in, gesturing for me to follow. "Look at this one," she said, holding up a sleek black handbag. "Isn't it gorgeous?" It was. But before I could respond, she added, "You'd look so good carrying this for me." I laughed nervously, unsure if she was joking. "Yeah, it's nice." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Well, what? Aren't you going to offer to get it for me?" I stared at her, waiting for the punchline that never came. She wasn't joking. Her smile faltered as the silence stretched between us. "I don't think that's appropriate," I said carefully. Her expression soured immediately. Without another word, she put the bag back on the shelf and stormed out of the store, leaving me standing there like an idiot. Needless to say, I never heard from her again. But the strangest date of all, the one that still makes me question reality, was with a woman I'll call Kate. We'd agreed to meet for coffee, and things started out normal enough. She was warm, engaging, and had a sharp wit that I found refreshing. But then, out of nowhere, she dropped a bombshell. "So let's talk about kinks," she said, her tone casual, as if she were suggesting we discuss our favorite movies. I nearly choked on my coffee. "Kinks?" I repeated, caught completely off guard. "Yeah," she said, leaning in with an eager glint in her eye. "I think it's important to be upfront about these things. For example, I like being slapped." I stared at her, unsure if I'd misheard. "Slapped?" "Full force," she clarified. "Across the face." My mind scrambled for an appropriate response. Was this a test? Some kind of icebreaker I didn't understand? But she wasn't finished. "My dad used to do it," she said matter-of-factly, and I guess it kind of stuck with me. The air left the room. My coffee cup hovered mid-air as I tried to process what she'd just said. Was she being serious? Was this a joke? Or some twisted attempt at vulnerability? "I don't think I can relate to that," I managed to say, my voice shaking slightly. She shrugged, completely unbothered. "Fair enough. But hey, at least I'm honest." I sat there, stunned, unsure if I was part of some elaborate prank or if this was genuinely her idea of first date conversation. To this day, I still don't know. My first foray into Tinder was supposed to be a simple, low-stakes evening. It was about 6 years ago, and I figured it was time to give online dating a shot. Swipe, chat, meet, repeat. That was the idea. What could possibly go wrong? I matched with a woman who seemed decent. Her photos were nice, her profile was engaging, and our chats were lighthearted and fun. I made a reservation at a cozy restaurant, something casual but still a step above coffee, and we agreed to meet there. I remember feeling that strange mix of nerves and anticipation as I walked into the restaurant. But when I saw her sitting at the table, I stopped short. She looked nothing like her photos. It wasn't just a bad angle or lighting. It was as if I'd matched with an entirely different person. The polished, vibrant woman from the photos was replaced by someone who looked like she'd wandered in by mistake. I hesitated for a moment, wondering if I should turn around and leave, but my upbringing got the better of me. Be polite. Be decent. Everyone deserves a chance, right? I plastered on a smile and joined her at the table, determined to make the best of it. Maybe her personality would shine through. Maybe there was a reason she'd chosen such wildly misleading pictures. The waiter came, drinks were ordered, and soon we were making the usual first date small talk. But then the conversation took a turn. "So," she said, swirling her wine glass, "why are you on Tinder?" I gave the standard answer about wanting to meet new people, hoping to find someone special, and asked her the same question. Her response was something else. "Well," she began, her voice dropping conspiratorially, "my last relationship ended badly." That's never a great start, but I nodded politely, prompting her to continue. She leaned forward, her tone becoming serious. "My boyfriend's girlfriend told me that my boyfriend was actually married." I blinked, unsure if I'd misheard. "Wait, your boyfriend's girlfriend?" "Yeah," she said, completely unfazed. "He had a girlfriend and a wife. None of us knew about each other." I stared at her, trying to wrap my head around the layers of deception in her story. "So, how did you not know he was married?" "He looked a lot younger than he was," she explained, taking another sip of wine. "He said he was 50, but he was really older." I raised an eyebrow. "How much older?" She pulled out her phone, scrolling through her photos before showing me a picture. "This is him." The man staring back at me from her screen looked closer to 60, if not 65. At that point, I felt like I was trapped in a bad sitcom. How had this become my life? I'd walked into this evening expecting an ordinary first date, and now I was dissecting the double life of a man who had somehow juggled a wife, a girlfriend, and another girlfriend. I decided I'd had enough. "Listen," I said gently, "I really appreciate the date, but I don't think we're a match. I wish you all the best, but I think it's better if we go our separate ways." She looked surprised but didn't argue. I paid the bill, thanked her for her time, and excused myself. Relief washed over me as I stepped outside and called for a grab to take me home. But as I waited for the car, I noticed her standing next to me. I turned to her, confused. "What are you doing?" She shrugged, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "So, where are we going?" I stared at her, trying to keep my voice calm. "I'm going to my home, and you're going to your home," I said, using my hands to gesture in opposite directions. She didn't say anything, just stood there watching me as I got into the car and left. I thought that was the end of it. The next morning, I was jolted out of bed by the sound of my doorbell ringing. Groggy and disoriented, I checked the video feed connected to my intercom, and my heart sank. It was her. She stood outside my door, shouting up at the camera, "Why haven't you texted me back? I thought we had a good time. Why are you ghosting me?" I rubbed my temples, trying to process what was happening. "I told you last night we weren't seeing each other again," I said into the intercom, my voice sharper than I intended. Her expression crumpled. "But why? I thought we had a connection." At this point, my patience had run out. "We didn't," I said bluntly. "Please leave." She started crying, loud, dramatic sobs that echoed through the quiet morning. I turned off the intercom, unwilling to engage any further. I watched through the video feed as she stood there for a while, sniffling and wiping her eyes, before finally walking away. For weeks, I kept expecting her to show up again. I considered changing my address, but since I used my home as my office, it wasn't a practical option. Fortunately, she never came back. 2 months later, I swiped right on someone new. This time, the experience was completely different. There were no misleading photos, no bizarre stories, no uninvited visits to my front door. Just genuine conversation, mutual respect, and the beginnings of something real. That woman is now my wife. I'd just gotten out of a long-term relationship, the kind that leaves you questioning your instincts, your taste in people, and whether love is just a kind of long-term gaslighting. I wasn't ready to date, not really, but I was lonely. And curiosity, paired with insomnia, makes for dangerous scrolling. That's how I found Caleb. We matched on a Tuesday night, just past midnight. His profile stood out, not because he was the most attractive, but because of how he wrote. His bio read, "Licensed therapist. Books over bars. I believe in the healing power of conversation and Thai food." It felt grounded. Safe. His photos were normal, him on a hiking trail, a blurry one with a dog, one sitting on a porch with a cup of tea, and a book I recognized. The body keeps the score. That night, he messaged me. "What's something you've learned about yourself in the past year that surprised you?" Not hey, not WID. A real question. I answered honestly. I told him I'd learned I wasn't as low maintenance as I thought. I needed more than I used to admit. He responded thoughtfully, asked more questions, listened. It felt like a therapy session, but not in a bad way. Just intentional. We talked for over 2 hours that night. By Friday, we'd made plans to meet. He suggested a quiet coffee shop on the east side, somewhere with plants hanging from the ceiling and a chalkboard menu that changed daily. He wore a soft blue button-down and smiled like someone who'd already forgiven you for being late. He asked me about my childhood before we'd even ordered. "I know it's a lot," he said, "but I don't like wasting time on surface-level stuff." I told him about my dad's temper, about how I learned to read moods like weather patterns, about how I was tired of pretending that didn't shape me. He didn't flinch. "That's incredibly self-aware," he said. "Most people aren't ready to look at that." He didn't talk much about himself that day, just nodded, leaned in, and asked the kind of follow-up questions that made you feel like you were being seen for the first time. We started seeing each other regularly. Sunday hikes, Wednesday night dinners, long drives with no destination. He was always calm, always composed. He said the right things, offered the right insights. "You're not broken," he told me once. "You've just been stretched in ways your nervous system didn't sign up for." I repeated that to myself for days afterward. It felt like medicine. He never rushed things physically. Said he wanted to build emotional safety first. At the time, I thought it was the most mature thing I'd ever heard. By the 3rd week, I started to notice something strange. Every time I opened up about something difficult, Caleb seemed almost brighter, more energized, like my vulnerability lit him up. He'd say things like, "You're not like other women I've dated. You're doing the work. Most people don't want to be this honest." It felt good, being seen like that, but also like I was being tested. I started leaning on him more. I stopped seeing my own therapist. Why pay someone when I had Caleb? He knew what he was doing. He had the language, the patience, the presence. But he never gave me specifics about his practice. When I asked where he worked, he said he was mostly private practice and consulting with a few startups. He never named names. Never shared a business card or a website. "I keep things low-key," he said. "Too many people overshare online." Eventually, my curiosity got the better of me. One night, after he fell asleep on my couch, I Googled his name. Nothing. No Psychology Today profile. No license record. No business listing. I tried variations, Caleb plus therapist plus Austin. Still nothing. I checked the Texas State Board of Examiners. No match. The next morning, I asked directly. "I couldn't find your therapist profile," I said carefully. "Do you go by a different name professionally?" His jaw tightened. Just for a second. "I don't advertise," he said. "Most of my clients come through referrals. I don't need a public profile." "Don't you have to be licensed by the state?" "I was," he said. "I let it lapse. Too much bureaucracy. I still do coaching work, though. It's basically the same." Something in my stomach dropped. "Isn't that illegal?" He laughed. "Relax, Sienna. I'm not doing surgery. I'm helping people talk through their feelings. You think I need a laminated certificate for that?" I didn't laugh. That week, I did more digging. I looked through his phone when he left it unlocked on my counter while taking a shower. I found messages to at least 4 other women. All recent. All using the same language he used with me. Phrases like emotional safety, holding space, "You're doing the work." I felt sick. I didn't confront him right away. I wanted to understand what I was dealing with. I reached out to one of the women. Her name was Elise. She lived in San Antonio. She told me she'd met Caleb on Hinge, that he said he was a trauma counselor doing a relationship research project. He'd asked her to journal about their interactions. He said it was therapeutic, she told me. He made me feel like I was healing. But it was all about control. I asked if she'd reported him. She'd tried, but he wasn't licensed. There was no board to hold him accountable. No agency that could take action. He operated in the gaps, just vague enough to avoid legal consequences, just convincing enough to keep women talking. I blocked him that night. His response was immediate. Dozens of texts. "Are you okay? Did I do something wrong?" I felt like we were getting somewhere real. I ignored them. Then came the guilt. "You're not just another person, Sienna. I opened up to you. I thought you cared about honesty." Then the threats. "I know where you work. You think people will believe you over me?" I went to the police. They said unless he physically harmed me or showed up at my home, there wasn't much they could do. I filed a report anyway. I changed my number. I warned my friends. But the damage was done. It wasn't just that he lied. It was the way he used language as a weapon. The way he mirrored people's pain back to them and called it love. The way he made you feel like you were finally being understood, only to twist it into control. He wasn't a therapist. He was a collector. Of stories. Of traumas. Of women who wanted to be seen. And the most dangerous part, he was really, really good at it. I went back to real therapy. It took months to untangle the guilt, the confusion, the shame. Because somewhere in that mess, I'd convinced myself that what we had was rare. That his insight meant safety. That emotional fluency was the same as emotional maturity. It wasn't. Now when people ask why I have trust issues, I just smile and say, I once dated a man who pretended to be a therapist. It didn't end well. It usually shuts them up. But every so often, I still hear his voice in my head. Soft. Assured. Saying things like, "You're not broken. You're doing the work. It's okay to trust me. But now I know better." It started on a Sunday evening in early October. I'd spent most of the day grading papers and folding laundry, and by 7:30, I was curled up on the couch with a glass of red wine, half watching a documentary and half swiping through Tinder, I know right. That's when I matched with a man named James. His profile was understated but confident. A few sharp-looking photos, one in a navy blazer, one hiking somewhere wooded, and one where he was sipping an espresso outside a cafe. I liked that he didn't try too hard. No emojis, no pickup lines, He looked like he had his life together, which felt rare. He messaged initially, "Is it just me, or does Sunday night always feel like a reminder that we're all pretending to be okay?" I smiled. Not exactly flirty, but strangely relatable. We talked for over 2 hours that night. He asked thoughtful questions about my job, I teach English at a high school, my favorite authors, my opinion on whether people could truly change. He was clever without being smug. I told him he sounded like someone who read poetry in secret. He didn't deny it. By Tuesday, we were texting throughout the day. He told me he worked in financial systems consulting, which meant nothing to me but sounded legitimate. He said he traveled frequently, mostly short-term contracts for businesses that needed help optimizing their security infrastructure. I asked if he ever got tired of hotels. His reply, "All the time. That's why I'm trying to find someone who feels like home." It felt a little rehearsed, but I let it go. We met in person that Friday. He picked a small wine bar in Midtown, dim lighting, jazz playing softly, the kind of place that made you feel like something important was happening even if it wasn't. He wore a charcoal coat and dark jeans, and he had this quiet confidence that made people turn their heads when he walked in. He greeted me with a warm hug and a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Still, he was engaging, funny in a dry way, attentive. He asked about my students, my family, my favorite childhood book, A Wrinkle in Time. He told me about growing up in Toronto, his time in Berlin, and how he once got trapped in a broken elevator in Tokyo for 3 hours. His stories were vivid. A little too vivid, maybe. But I was drawn in. He didn't try to kiss me that night. Just walked me to my car and said, "I'd really like to see you again." We saw each other twice more that week. He never invited me to his place. Said it was being renovated. He never let me pick him up, either. Said he preferred to meet at places midway. I noticed he paid in cash. Every time. By the 3rd week, I was getting the feeling that something was off. He never posted on social media. Not even a burner account. He didn't have LinkedIn. When I searched his name and the company he said he worked for, nothing came up. No matching profiles. No articles. No conference panels. Nothing. I asked him about it. He gave me a crooked smile. I keep a low profile on purpose. My work involves sensitive systems. It's better that way. I nodded, pretending to understand. But that feeling didn't go away. Then came the night I dropped my phone under the couch cushion while we were watching a movie at my place. I reached to grab it and noticed his wallet had fallen out of his coat pocket. It had a different name on the ID, Ethan Cole. At first, I thought it was a mistake. Maybe it was a friend's wallet. Maybe James was his middle name. But the photo was his. Same face. Same calculating eyes. I stared at it for a long moment before quietly slipping it back where I'd found it. That night, I barely slept. The next day, I Googled Ethan Cole Detroit and found an old arrest record tied to fraud charges in Ohio. The mugshot was grainy, but it was him. No doubt. My stomach turned. I dug deeper. Across several states, there were small news articles, cases involving stolen credit card data, identity theft, fake business filings. Nothing that had landed him in prison long-term, but enough to see a pattern. I felt sick. I wanted to confront him, but I was scared. I didn't know what he was capable of. Instead, I ghosted him, blocked his number, deleted the app. 3 days later, he showed up at my school. I was walking to my car after dismissal when I saw him leaning against the hood, arms crossed, expression unreadable. "You've been ignoring me," he said. My voice caught in my throat. "You need to leave." He didn't move. "I think we should talk." "There's nothing to talk about." He took a step forward. "You looked through my wallet." I froze. "I don't like being lied to either, Alana," he said softly. "But you don't know the whole story." I stepped back. "I don't want to know. Stay away from me." He watched me for a long moment, then nodded. "All right, but if you tell anyone, make sure they believe you." He walked away. I sat in my car for 15 minutes before I could breathe normally again. That night, I reported everything to the police. I gave them his name, or what I believed was his real one, and what I'd found. They said there wasn't much they could do unless he made a direct threat or harmed me. I filed a report anyway. I changed my locks. Alerted my school admin, told my closest friends. I didn't hear from him again. It's strange how ordinary a night can feel until it isn't. I matched with Troy on Tinder one rainy Tuesday in October. I remember the weather because it had been drizzling for 3 days straight, and I was in one of those moods where I wanted to believe something good could still happen in the middle of all that gray. Troy's profile was solid. Nothing flashy, no shirtless mirror selfies or weird bios. Just a few clean photos of him hiking, one at a coffee shop, and one with a dog that may or may not have been his. His answers were dryly funny. One prompt asked for a controversial opinion, and he'd written, "Cold pizza is a war crime." That made me laugh out loud, and I swiped right without overthinking it. We matched instantly. He messaged me within 10 minutes. Nothing creepy. Just, "So where do you stand on hot pizza? Deal breaker?" We talked for a few days. His tone stayed light, but there was substance too. He asked about my work, graphic design for a local firm, and told me he worked in UX for a startup in the Fremont area. We bonded over our shared love of Korean food, rainy cities, and old horror movies. He made me feel comfortable, like we were already in on some quiet joke together. When he asked me to meet up for dinner, I didn't hesitate. We chose a place called Ginger Lantern, a small fusion restaurant tucked into a quiet street near Capitol Hill. It was the kind of spot with Edison bulbs, exposed brick, and a menu that leaned heavily on clever wordplay. It felt like the right mix of casual and cool. We met at 7:15 on a Friday night. Troy arrived before I did. He texted, "I'm here, corner table by the window, smiley face," just as I was locking up my bike. When I walked in, he stood to greet me. He looked exactly like his pictures, tall, sandy brown hair, a little scruffy. He wore a black pea coat over a sweater and jeans. "Hey," he said, smiling. "Glad you made it." "Likewise," I said. We shook hands awkwardly, then sat down across from each other. The conversation flowed. We talked about how weird online dating was, about the best dive bars in the city, about our mutual love of obscure horror movies. He recommended one I hadn't seen, Lake Mungo, and promised I'd be creeped out for days. He was polite, attentive. He didn't interrupt or overshare. When I mentioned that I'd recently gotten back into painting, he asked what kind, and actually seemed interested. He made a few light jokes about startup culture, but nothing smug. I remember thinking, this is what a normal date is supposed to feel like. I ordered a lychee soda. He got tea. We split spring rolls and ordered separate entrees. He commented on the music in the background, some mellow indie band, and asked if I wanted to do this again sometime. I nodded, smiling. "I'd like that." At about 8:30, I excused myself to use the restroom, which was located down a short hallway near the back of the restaurant. When I came back 3 minutes later, Troy was gone. At first, I thought he'd gone to the restroom too. His tea was still on the table, half full, but his coat was missing. I sat back down and waited. A few minutes passed. The server came by and asked, "Did your friend step out?" I said, "I think so." 10 more minutes passed. Then 20. I texted him, "Hey, everything okay?" No response. I opened Tinder. His profile was gone. Not unmatched, gone. As if it had never existed. I checked Instagram, realizing I'd never followed him there. I searched his first name and the startup he claimed to work at. Nothing. Not a single trace. I didn't even know his last name. I sat there, staring at the empty chair across from me, trying to piece together what had just happened. Eventually, the server returned and placed the check in front of me. 2 entrees, an appetizer, 2 drinks. $56.42. I paid it. As I walked out into the cold, damp night, my ears buzzed with confusion. I wasn't angry yet, just stunned. I replayed every part of the evening. He hadn't seemed uncomfortable. He hadn't checked his phone. There had been no awkward silences, no red flags. It had felt easy. Almost too easy, I realized later. I got home and sat on the edge of my bed in my coat, staring at nothing. It wasn't just that he'd left, it was the erasure of it. The clean, surgical precision of disappearing without a trace. No explanation. No goodbye. Not even a fake excuse. The next day, I Googled the restaurant's name alongside keywords like Tinder date disappeared and left during dinner. I found a few threads on Reddit, a couple of stray tweets, but nothing that matched exactly. I told a friend later that week, and she said, "Maybe you got a call. Emergency or something?" "Then why unmatch?" I asked. "Why delete everything?" She had no answer. I've thought about that night more times than I care to admit. Not because I miss him, I don't. But because I've never resolved it. I've dated people who ghosted after a week. I've had lukewarm first dates that faded into silence. But this was different. This was someone looking me in the eye, talking about favorite movies and dumplings and second dates, then vanishing like a magician slipping through a trapdoor. I still wonder why. Was it some kind of elaborate game? A dare? A social experiment? Did he do it for the thrill, the control, The power of confusing someone without ever having to see the fallout. Or was he just deeply unstable? I'll never know. But here's what I do know. I now ask for last names before I meet someone. I look them up. I let a friend know where I'm going and who I'm meeting. I even take a photo of the person when we meet, covertly if I have to. Not because I'm paranoid, but because sometimes the most dangerous thing isn't what someone says or does. It's what they leave behind when they vanish. Dating in Chicago is like ordering coffee from a place you've never been. You might get exactly what you want, or you might end up with something that leaves a bitter taste in your mouth. I was 27 at the time, working in marketing for a nonprofit and living in a high-rise apartment in River North. I wasn't jaded by dating apps, not yet, anyway, but I was cautious. My rules were simple: meet in public, early evening, no alcohol on the first date, and always have an exit plan. I matched with Brandon on Hinge. His profile was polished, 3 photos in a crisp button-down, one of him doing yoga at the lakefront, and a final one with a golden retriever. His prompts were clever enough to stand out, but not so over the top that they felt rehearsed. We messaged for a few days. He was responsive, articulate, and had a sense of humor that came through in short bursts. He mentioned he worked in finance, lived in Lincoln Park, and was looking for something meaningful, not just another swipe. Normally I'd roll my eyes at that line, but he didn't push anything. No weird questions. No pressure. He asked if I wanted to grab dinner at a place called Ella's Table, a trendy but not overly fancy spot near the Loop. I'd been there once before and remembered it had good lighting, decent food, and enough background noise to make conversation feel easy. I agreed. He arrived before I did and was already seated when I walked in. Brandon stood up as I approached the table, smiled, and pulled out my chair. He looked like his pictures, tall, clean-shaven, with a confident but not cocky demeanor. He wore a navy blazer over a dark gray sweater, and he smelled faintly of something citrusy. "Jasmine," he said warmly. "Glad you made it." "Of course. Thanks for picking the spot. It's cute." He smiled. Figured something in the middle of the city would be easiest. We ordered quickly, salmon for me, some kind of steak dish for him. He got sparkling water. I stuck with still. The first half of the dinner was pleasant. We talked about work, favorite books, and the sheer absurdity of dating in a city where people ghost more often than they text back. He was charming, but not in a try-hard way. He listened, made eye contact, and didn't look at his phone once. At one point, I remember thinking, this could actually go somewhere. But then something shifted. It started subtle. He asked if I wanted to come back to his place for dessert. I smiled and said, "Thanks, but I've got an early morning." He laughed. "Come on, I'm not trying to kidnap you. I've got this amazing tiramisu from a bakery in Little Italy. You'll love it." I shook my head again. "I appreciate it, really. But I think I'll call it a night after this." His smile faltered for the first time. "You sure? I mean, the night's still young." There was a slight edge in his voice now. Not aggressive, but expectant. "I'm sure," I said gently. "I've had a nice time, though." He didn't respond right away. Just took a long sip of his water and looked out the window. The server brought the check. Brandon reached for it, but instead of paying it quietly like he'd hinted he would, he looked at me. "So how are we doing this?" I blinked. "I thought you were covering it?" He smirked. "I mean, I was going to. But if this is just a friendly dinner, maybe we should split it." I stared at him, unsure if he was joking. He didn't look like he was. "Okay," I said slowly. "That's fine. I can cover mine." I pulled out my card, and we each paid for our meals. The server left, and the silence stretched. Then Brandon spoke again. His voice was low, but the bitterness had fully set in. "You know, I'm just tired of this." I raised an eyebrow. "Of what?" "Of women pretending to be interested just to get a free meal. You all act like you're so busy, so empowered, but half the time, it's just a hustle." I blinked. "Excuse me? I mean, what was this? Some experiment? Just sizing me up for sport?" I stood up. "I'm going to go." He scoffed. "Of course you are." I turned and walked toward the door, heart pounding. As I reached for the handle, I heard him mutter behind me. "Another one. Just like the rest." I didn't look back. Outside, the air felt colder than it had 2 hours before. I walked quickly toward the train station, replaying the conversation in my head. I hadn't said anything rude. I hadn't led him on. But somehow, in his mind, my polite decline had turned me into a villain. By the time I got home, I had 3 messages from him on Hinge. "Wow, you really played that well. Don't act like you're better than me." Hope the next guy enjoys paying for your lies. I blocked him. The next day, I received a message from an unknown number. Just one word. User. I blocked that too. I'd love to say that was the last time I ever had an experience like that, but it wasn't. It was, however, the last time I let someone guilt trip me for saying no. What stuck with me wasn't just Brandon's bitterness, it was how quickly the mask slipped. One moment, he was a polite, well-dressed guy with a good job and a friendly dog. The next, he was accusing me of being part of some grand conspiracy to get free entrees. It reminded me that nice is not the same as kind, and that entitlement often wears a smile until it doesn't get what it wants. I still go on dates. I still use apps. But now, I watch more closely for the cracks beneath the surface. It started with a familiar face in an unfamiliar place. I was sitting on my balcony one night, sipping a glass of Riesling and half-heartedly scrolling through Facebook dating. I had only joined out of curiosity. It had popped up while I was checking an event invite, and I figured, why not? I wasn't actively trying to meet anyone, but I also wasn't completely closed off to the idea. I was 31, single, and living alone in Austin. My last relationship had ended a year prior, and I'd spent the months since rediscovering how to enjoy my own company. That's when I saw him. Kyle. We had gone to the same high school in San Antonio. He was a year ahead of me, and I remembered him mostly as the quiet guy who always wore band t-shirts and sat near the back of the classroom. We weren't friends, exactly, but he wasn't a stranger either. We'd probably exchanged a total of 30 words during our school years. His profile photo showed him standing next to a dog, some kind of shepherd mix, and he looked older, of course, but not bad. His hair was shorter than I remembered, and he had a beard now. His bio said he had moved to Austin to get away from the noise, and that he was into hiking, alternative music, and independent thinking. I hesitated for a moment, then tapped like. Within 10 minutes, he'd matched with me and sent a message. Rachel from Ms. Carter's homeroom? Small world. I laughed out loud. It was such a specific memory. I replied, Yep. That was forever ago. You look different. We messaged back and forth for a few days. Kyle was polite, articulate, and seemed a little more confident than I remembered. He told me he worked remotely doing IT support and had recently adopted his dog Luna. He asked thoughtful questions, and it was refreshing to talk to someone who didn't immediately pivot the conversation toward flirting or overly personal topics. Eventually, he asked if I wanted to meet up for a walk around Lady Bird Lake. It was one of my favorite spots in the city, open, public, and peaceful. I agreed. We met on a Sunday afternoon. The sun was out, but the breeze off the water made it feel mild. Kyle looked the same as his photos, tall, slightly broad-shouldered, wearing a gray hoodie and jeans. Luna trotted beside him, tail wagging. Rachel, he said with a smile. Glad you didn't ghost me. I smiled back. Glad you didn't turn out to be a catfish. We started walking the loop. For the first 20 minutes, everything felt easy. We talked about high school memories, the absurdity of Facebook dating, and our favorite local restaurants. Kyle was a good conversationalist in short bursts, but as the walk continued, something about him started to shift. He brought up how he hated Instagram because it's basically a surveillance tool. I laughed, thinking he was joking, but he didn't smile. I'm serious, he said. You don't think it's weird how people willingly tag their location? Or how facial recognition software is improving because of selfies? I nodded slowly. I mean, sure, that's a little creepy. He went on about how he never uses apps that require his face, how he disabled his phone's microphone, how he's convinced Google is tracking eye movement through front-facing cameras. It wasn't just a passing comment. It turned into a 10-minute monologue. I tried to steer the conversation elsewhere. So, how's Luna adjusting to city life? She's fine, he said. Better at reading people than most humans. I smiled awkwardly, unsure how to respond. Then, as we passed a group of joggers, he stopped walking and asked, dead serious, Do you ever think some people are just NPCs? I blinked. Like video game characters? He nodded. Yeah, just running scripts. No depth, no awareness. They're not real. I laughed, assuming again that he was joking. But his face stayed flat. I mean, how else do you explain some of the people you see every day? No curiosity, no questions. Just consuming, repeating. It's like they're programmed. I felt a chill creep up my spine. I didn't want to be rude, but I also didn't want to keep walking through this increasingly surreal conversation. I think I should head back, I said, trying to keep my tone light. I have to meet a friend soon. He tilted his head. You're not curious? About what? About what's real. About who's pulling the strings. I forced a smile. Maybe another time. We walked back toward the trailhead in silence. Luna trotted ahead, occasionally glancing back as if sensing the tension. When we reached the parking lot, I turned to say goodbye, but Kyle reached out and touched my elbow lightly. Just be careful, he said. Most people aren't who they say they are. I nodded quickly, pulled away, and got into my car. That should have been the end of it, but Kyle kept messaging me. At first, it was casual. Did you get home safe? Nice seeing you again. I replied politely, but didn't encourage more conversation. Then the messages got longer, stranger. He sent me links to articles about surveillance drones disguised as birds. He forwarded YouTube videos claiming celebrities were using deepfakes to hide their true identities. He asked if I'd ever noticed the color of the sky changing over the years. I stopped responding. That's when he started commenting on old photos of mine on Facebook. Ones from years ago. Cute, he wrote on a picture of me at a college party. You always liked red lipstick. I checked my privacy settings immediately and locked everything down. I unfollowed him, then blocked him on Facebook and Facebook dating. The next day, I got a message request on Instagram. You can block me all you want. I just thought you were smarter than that. Chills ran down my arms. I blocked the account immediately, then made my profile private. I hadn't even realized it had been public. Over the next week, I received 2 emails from addresses I didn't recognize. Both were short. One said, "Trust your instincts, not the system." The other said, "You shouldn't post where you run. It's not safe." That one made me feel physically sick. I changed all my passwords. I deleted old public posts. I stopped tagging locations in real time. I even considered changing my phone number, but decided to wait. For a while, nothing happened. Then one Saturday morning, I saw a dog outside my apartment building. It looked exactly like Luna. Same markings, same off-white patch on the chest. I watched from my window as she sniffed around the sidewalk, then trotted back toward a man standing behind a parked car. It was Kyle. He didn't look up at my window, didn't knock on the door. Just stood there for a few minutes, then walked away with Luna on the leash. I called the non-emergency police line and filed an incident report. They couldn't do much without a direct threat, but they told me to document everything and call again if he returned. I haven't seen him since that day. But for months, I felt watched. Every time I posted a story or uploaded a photo, I triple-checked who could see it. I started using a VPN. I removed my old college blog. I even wiped my Pinterest board, just in case. It's funny how fast a sense of safety can dissolve. All it takes is one person who seems just familiar enough to let your guard down. Someone who once sat behind you in homeroom, who remembered your math teacher's name, who shared your hometown. I've learned that nostalgia can be a powerful disguise. And that not everyone you used to know deserves a second look. I matched with Nathan on a rainy Wednesday night in March. I was curled up on my couch with a bowl of ramen and a glass of wine, killing time by swiping through faces I'd seen 100 times before. His profile caught my attention because it looked like someone had actually put thought into it. No blurry group shots or shirtless mirror pics. Just a smiling man with soft brown eyes, a dog named Jasper, and a short bio that read, "Looking for someone to share playlists and pancakes with." It was cheesy, but it made me smile. I swiped right. We matched instantly. Within a few minutes, he messaged, "You seem like the kind of person who always knows the best song for the moment." "True," I replied, "only if the moment calls for sad girl indie ballads." He laughed, or text laughed. "Perfect. I'll bring the pancakes, you bring the heartbreak." We talked for 2 hours that first night. Music, books, travel. I told him about my job as a marketing assistant at a nonprofit. He told me he worked in software development and freelanced as a photographer on weekends. He sent me a photo he'd taken of the lakefront at sunrise. It looked like it belonged on a postcard. By Friday, we'd agreed to meet. We chose a casual spot in Lincoln Park. I wore my favorite sweater and tried not to overthink it. He was already waiting when I arrived, clean-shaven, warm smile, leaning casually against a street lamp like a scene out of a romantic comedy. And he was charming, genuinely funny. He listened when I spoke, laughed at my jokes, and ordered exactly what I did without it feeling like a gimmick. Afterward, he insisted on walking me to my car, even though it was cold and drizzling. "I really like you," he said as I opened my door. "You've got this light." I blushed. That's sweet. Not sweet. Honest. We kissed. Just once. It was soft and unhurried. I drove home smiling like a teenager. Over the next few weeks, we texted constantly. He'd send me memes in the morning, ask about my day at lunch, and call me before bed. We saw each other every weekend and sometimes during the week. He brought over homemade soup when I was sick. He surprised me at work with coffee. He even made me a Spotify playlist called Eliza Vibes. It was fast, but it felt good. Then things started to shift. Slowly. The first red flag came disguised as a compliment. "You're so much better than your friends," he said one night while we were watching a movie on my couch. "What do you mean?" "They just seem shallow." "I don't know. I can tell you think more deeply than they do." I didn't like that. My friends were smart, funny, loyal. But I let it slide. Maybe he was just trying to say I stood out. Then he started asking more questions. Who was I texting? Why didn't I reply sooner? Who was the guy I tagged in that Instagram story? "You're just so beautiful," he said after each question. "I get nervous someone else will try to take you." He never raised his voice. Never called me names. He just worried a lot. At first, I reassured him. I liked him. I wanted things to work. But the questions didn't stop. One Friday night, I went out for drinks with coworkers. When I got home, he was waiting outside my apartment. "I was just in the area," he said, holding a bag of takeout. "Thought we could hang out." I hadn't told him where I'd be that night. I hadn't invited him over. And it was after 11. I told him I was tired, that I just wanted to get ready for bed. He frowned, then smiled. "Of course. I just missed you." That weekend, he asked for a key to my apartment. I said no. It felt too soon. He pouted but didn't argue. The next morning, I found my bathroom cabinet rearranged. His toothbrush was in the holder. His razor on the shelf. "I just figured we're past the formalities," he said when I asked. I tried to laugh it off. But my stomach was tight. I started pulling back, just a little. Taking longer to respond. Making plans without him. That's when the messages started. At first, they were disguised as concern. "You okay? Haven't heard from you in an hour. I saw you posted a story but didn't answer my text. Everything cool?" Then came the guilt. "I guess I care more than you do. I rearranged my whole day to see you, but whatever." Then the anger. "You're just like everyone else. You want attention, not love." I told him I needed space. He showed up at my office the next day. "I brought you lunch," he said, holding a brown bag like nothing was wrong. I asked how he knew where I worked. He shrugged. "You mentioned it." I hadn't. That's when I realized he'd gone through my bag. My work ID had the address. I started documenting everything. Messages, visits. I blocked his number. Changed my locks. Told my building manager to report any unfamiliar guests. But he kept finding ways. He created fake Instagram accounts to watch my stories. He sent flowers to my building with no name. He waited outside my gym. The final straw came the night I found him sitting on the steps outside my apartment. Hood up, hands in his lap. "I just wanted to see you," he said, like it was normal. Like it was okay. I didn't speak. I walked past him, locked the door, and called the police. They couldn't arrest him. He hadn't technically broken any laws. But I filed for a restraining order the next day. It was granted 2 weeks later. That was the last time I saw him in person. But the fear hasn't left. I still jump when I hear footsteps behind me. I still check locks twice. I still hesitate before posting online. People talk about stalking like it's dramatic, like it's something that happens to celebrities or in movies. But it starts with compliments, with playlists, with soup when you're sick. It starts when someone makes you feel wanted, and it ends when they make you feel like you can't breathe. I was in New York for 5 days, just enough time to get overwhelmed, overspend, and convince myself I could live there someday. I'd flown in from Seattle for a conference, but the days were light on obligation. I spent most of my time walking aimlessly, eating dollar pizza slices, and pretending to know where I was going. On my second night, I opened Tinder. Not really looking for anything. Just curious. Lonely, maybe. That's when I matched with Tracy. Her profile was unassuming. A few photos, a close-up with a coffee cup, one in front of the Met, one where she was laughing with someone cropped out of the frame. Her bio read, "Native New Yorker. Bad at small talk. Good at snacks." I messaged her first. "What kind of snacks are we talking about?" She replied a few minutes later. "Cheddar popcorn, fancy olives, and anything with sesame seeds." We clicked. Instantly. She had this dry, offbeat humor, that made me feel like I'd known her for longer than a few texts. She asked what brought me to New York, and I told her the truth. A conference I was only half interested in, and a desire to see the city like a local. Then you need a local, she wrote. We planned to meet the next evening. She suggested a walk through Central Park before grabbing drinks. It's touristy but still magic at night, she said. I met her at the 72nd Street entrance, just after 6. She wore a denim jacket over a sundress, and had her hair pulled back in a loose bun. She looked exactly like her pictures, which startled me a little. I'd gotten used to the slight mismatches, the filtered versions of people. You're taller than I expected, she said, squinting up at me. You're exactly what I expected, I replied, and she laughed. We started walking, falling into easy conversation. We talked about the city, what she loved, what she hated. She'd grown up in Queens, moved into Manhattan for school, and never left. You either get addicted to the noise or it drives you out, she said. I'm kind of into the noise, I admitted. We wandered down winding paths lined with trees just starting to turn gold. The air held that early autumn crispness that makes everything feel cinematic. She pointed out tiny details I would have missed. The statue of Balto, the hidden benches, the way certain paths curved to reveal skyline views. I told her about Seattle. She'd never been. Too quiet, she said. I'd lose my mind. We stopped for hot dogs at a cart near Bethesda Terrace. As we ate, she asked what I would do if I had one more night in the city. This, I said. Exactly this. She smiled, then looked down at her feet. That's a good answer. We headed north along the mall, walking slowly. The sky was deepening into dusk, and the lamps flickered on one by one. We passed couples, joggers, dog walkers. It felt safe. Normal. We were near the Ramble when it happened. A man stepped onto the path ahead of us. He wore a dark hoodie and jeans, hands in his pockets. At first, I thought he was just passing by. Then another man stepped out behind us. I turned toward Tracy. Her face went pale. Don't move, the first guy said, lifting his sweatshirt to reveal a gun tucked into his waistband. Time slowed. I could hear my heartbeat in my ears, loud and uneven. Wallets. Phones. Now. The second man moved behind Tracy. I caught her eye, and she shook her head just barely. I handed over my phone and wallet. Tracy did the same. The man with the gun stepped closer. You got anything else? No, I said. He leaned toward Tracy. Jewelry. That necklace. She hesitated. It was a thin silver chain. Not fancy. He reached for it, and she flinched. Don't touch her, I said louder than I meant to. He turned to me, eyes narrowing. I raised my hands. Just take it. We're not fighting. He yanked the necklace off and stepped back. Then the second man said, Let's go. They vanished into the trees as quickly as they'd appeared. We stood there frozen. The silence returned, too quiet now, like the park was holding its breath. Tracy was trembling. Are you okay? I asked. She nodded, but her hands wouldn't stop shaking. I put my arm around her, gently, and she leaned into me. We found a park ranger near the Great Lawn. He called NYPD. We spent 2 hours filing reports, answering questions. They asked for descriptions, checked nearby cameras, told us we did the right thing by not resisting. By the time we left the station, it was almost midnight. I can walk you home, I said. She shook her head. I'll take a cab. We stood on the curb in silence. This was not the date I had in mind, I said, trying to lighten the mood. She cracked a small smile. Me neither. Still, I said, I'm glad I met you. She looked at me for a long moment. Me too. Then she got into the cab and disappeared into traffic. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, she texted. Still rattled, but really glad you were there. We met for coffee the day after. Sat outside a cafe in the East Village, watching people walk by. We didn't talk much about the mugging. It felt distant already, like something that had happened to other people. Instead, we talked about the mundane, her annoying coworker, my flight home, the cost of New York bagels. We laughed a little, but there was a weight between us now. Something unspoken. I keep thinking what would have happened if we weren't together, she said finally. I know, I said. I've thought about that too. We stayed in touch after I flew back to Seattle. Texts, the occasional call. She sent me pictures of her cat. I sent her a photo of the first rainy day back home. But the connection faded. We tried for a while. Made vague plans to visit. But life kept moving. Work picked up. New people came in. The text slowed, then stopped. Sometimes I still think about her, about that night. There's a strange intimacy in surviving something with someone you barely know. It binds you, but not always in a lasting way. We were never really together. We were just two people who happened to hold hands while the world cracked open for a moment, and then, just as quickly, closed again.